That was a 40-watt vape on the Serpent Mini. How did that happen? Notch coils. Check it out. Alrighty then, welcome back. Hey, like I showed you, I just picked up some notch coils for, well, any atomizer at all, but I'm kind of taken with the Serpent Mini. I love this little thing, and I wondered if I could do a little bit more to improve some of the airflow, or, I don't know, get a little bit more out of it. I was putting Claptons in that, and yeah, I still love the Clapton. I love what Claptons do. I love how they produce a lot of extra flavor. You get a lot of surface area out of it. But one of the things that I have to worry about with this particular atomizer in particular is how short it is. And because of that, the little chamber that's in here is also really, really short. Because of that, I can't put a particularly tall Clapton, or wide if you're, talking about horizontal terms, but I do vertical coil, so I can't put anything particularly tall in there. And also I can't put a very wide diameter or inner diameter of a Clapton. Anything much beyond about 3.5 millimeters just won't fit in this vertically or even horizontally. The distance between the posts, the travel distance rather between the posts, just won't allow it. I wanted more metal surface area, so I wanted to pick up some notch coils. I remember Joytech coming out with these several months back, and it looked like a great idea. Basically, for those of you who don't know, a notch coil is just a metal tube with a couple of leads stamp welded on the ends, and it acts just like a regular traditional coil. Electricity travels through it in kind of a coil fashion. The problem with the notch coils was that they were made pretty much for your velocity style 2-post, 3-post style decks, where you've got the posts and then the coil, or let's see, you got the posts here and then the coil just attaches in that way. Because of that, most of the leads on notch coils that you see out there are all stamp welded on the same side of the coil, and that doesn't lend itself very well to either a vertical coil setup or a single coil, dedicated single coil RTA like this. Now you remember from the review that I had of this, excuse me, the Serpent Mini has a single coil RTA, and it's got those staggered post holes. You got the airflow hole here, and then you got the 2 staggered post holes. And if both of the leads are on the same side of the notch coil, it wouldn't work that way. It just would be really painful. These, if you take a look at them, one lead is stamp welded on this side, and the other lead is stamp welded on that side. And in fact, they come out of the box like this, pretty much set up for a vertical orientation. And yeah, that's how I've been rocking it. Now, for a single coil setup, if I want to do a horizontal orientation, all I would have to do is take this lead that's on the bottom here, bend it to where it's straightened out that way, take this lead, bend it to where it's straightened out that way, and it'll just slide right into the coil, or into the deck of the Serpent Mini. And I've done that. I did the horizontal orientation, and yeah, it dramatically improved flavor output. Vapor output, I guess, was about the same, because the airflow was about the same. Because what you got to remember is the inner diameter of one of these coils, and that is the diameter that you're seeing in the center of the coil right there, is 5 millimeters. This thing's huge. And when you lay this down horizontally, it's covering up the airflow hole, and then you got to remember this is going to be full of cotton. And with the notch coil in particular, you don't want to leave any empty room in there. These things have a ramp-up time like that. You press the button and they're firing pretty much at the maximum wattage. And if you have any gaps in there where there's cotton not touching the chamber, it's going to singe your cotton and scorch your juice. So you want to make sure that these are stuffed. You don't want to be packed like a cartomizer or anything, but they got to be pretty well, fairly packed. So anyway, I digress. I did the horizontal coil, and it worked fine, and I got about the same airflow out of a horizontal coil with this as I did with vertical Clapton. The challenge with this was that I wanted to do this with the vertical coil, and I found that, let me pull this a little closer to the camera, with this, the big challenge was the amount of space, or the height of this coil actually. And if you look at the notches, there's a little bit of room between them. So the issue I was having is as I was screwing down the top of the chamber, it was actually impacting the top of this, and that could cause a short. So what I did is I took a pair of tweezers and I compressed the coil vertically, just like that. I closed up all that extra space, and I did that as I was firing it on another atomizer. You see, when I do it here with a cold coil, it just springs pretty much right back where it came from. You do this on a coil that you're heating up, and it stays put. And these coils here are 0.2 ohm coils, and if I put it in an atomizer as it is, just like that, it's going to register anywhere between about 0.22, 0.24. Accurate enough. After you compress them down a little bit, the resistance actually goes up, which I like. I think it's a little bit easier to work with and play around with wattage with a slightly higher resistance. And anyway, at the end of the day, what I got is a vertical notch coil in this, measuring out at 0.36 ohms. And I've been rocking this thing at 410 degrees, 41 watts. And, oh my god. 41 watts, 410 degrees. I have found that with the notch coil, because the ramp up time is so quick, I don't want to run it any higher than about 420, 430 degrees. Anything beyond that, it starts actually getting uncomfortable because it ramps up to that temperature so bloody quick. And also I don't want to go with a wattage higher than about 40, 45 watts, just because that's what these are designed for. These are designed for low wattage. Anything higher than that, you really run the risk of burning your cotton. They're really not designed for that. Another thing I found with the notch coils is that I don't like them at all in wattage mode. They ramp up way too fast and I end up scorching my juice. I end up burning the wicks. Now, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it. I'm going to try to not cover the screen. When I fire this, when I'm actually vaping on it, take a look at two things. Take a look at the temperature, how quickly it climbs up to the 410 degrees, and it's going to bounce, just like temperature control should. And then take a look at the wattage. If you can see it, it's going to be all over the place. And that's ideal because the ramp up and ramp down time, how fast this thing heats up and how fast it cools down, is almost instantaneous. And that makes it absolutely perfect for temp control. I've got this, it is a stainless steel 316 coil, and I've got this in stainless steel temp control mode. So take a look at the screen if I can keep it on screen. Hang on. It is doing exactly what temperature control should be doing. And it works great. So, why did I do that? What am I getting out of this? Do I get more airflow? Yeah, I get tremendously more airflow out of this with a vertical notch coil than I do with a vertical Clapton. Why? Like I said, with the vertical Clapton, about the biggest inner diameter I could get in this particular deck is about 3 to 3.5 millimeters, and 3.5 was really pushing it. The issue was not so much the inner diameter of the Clapton, but the outer diameter of the Clapton. And Clapton wire is just thick, heavy gauge wire. You got a wire wrapped in another wire, and it makes the actual coil itself kind of girthy. So if you've got a 3.5 millimeter inner diameter, you've probably got, with any type of sizable Clapton, and I was using a 2632 wrap, and the outer diameter of that coil was somewhere in the range of 5 millimeters or something. It was pretty sizable. And then by the time I do any type of wrapping on that, it just didn't really work well to go any larger than that. The airflow in this particular tank, and this is why I mention all that, the airflow slots lead to a tube that goes right underneath the coil. That tube has a 4 millimeter inner diameter. If I tried a 4 millimeter Clapton, even a 2632 wrap, the outer diameter was substantially over 5 millimeters, about 5.5. And it almost went from post to post and didn't leave any room for wicking. And if you take a Clapton and you don't put enough wick on it, you're going to burn the crap out of that wick. You're going to scorch your juice, and you're also going to get flooding at the same time. You're going to get the worst of all three worlds. It didn't work well in this. Now, these 5 millimeter inner diameter coils, you would think would have the same issue, but look how thin that stuff is. I mean, it's paper thin. So while you got a 5mm inner diameter, your outer diameter is barely more than that. It might be 5.2 millimeters. I mean, this stuff is really thin. That makes it really, really good for doing things like what I'm trying to do. And it also gives you a lot of surface area in the process. I mean, compared to a Clapton with a similar diameter and height, this has about, I mean, even compared to something like a fused Clapton, this has about double the surface area. And it works great. So, basically what I've got in here is a 5mm tube sitting on top of a 4mm tube. The bottleneck, air-wise, is my drip tip right now, and that's ideal. That's what you want. You want to maximize all your airflow, that way you can control it. And with the vertically oriented notch coil, I've doubled my airflow in this. Vapor, it's about the same as it was out of the Clapton. Here's what's different. The flavor. The flavor I get out of these notch coils is absolutely outstanding. It's astounding, really, the amount of flavor that comes out of these coils. Because you got that massive amount of surface area, because the ramp up goes right up to the 400 degrees that I've got, or 410 degrees that I've got set up. It just starts chugging vapor, and the flavor, I would say, easily doubles the flavor, if you could quantify it, that I got out of the Clapton coils. I mean, really, that's what these are about. Vapor production does increase, a little bit. Air production, it did increase in this atomizer, but I mean, notch coils in and of themselves really don't increase airflow. It just depends on what atomizer you're using them and how you set it up. Like I said, when I set it up as a horizontal notch coil right on top of it, it actually decreased my airflow because I had a big chunk of 5mm thick cotton sitting on top of it. So, how did I do this? And I'm going to try to do this without making a mess. Blah, blah, blah. Let's let all that juice drain down. I set the notch coil up. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my throat right now. In a horizontal orientation. You can see it right there. And then I wrapped it up. I just wrapped it around. And I led some wrapping down into the bottom. And I left enough room up top that I kind of insulated electronically against the top of the chamber if I needed to have it press against, which it actually barely does not after I compress the coil as I did. And this thing's probably going to leak right now, the first vape I have off of it, just because I just released all that air pressure inside. Let's find out. It is a notch coil, and you see how much cotton I put in that thing. These things drink juice. I mean, this tank was just about full, or was actually full before I started the review, and you can see the little bubble in there right now. I've only taken a couple hits off of it, so you get that flavor production at the expense of juice consumption. I'm good with that, though. I'm all about flavor. If you're a vapor chaser, not a bad way to go. Or a cloud chaser, rather. This is not a bad way to go. If you're a flavor hound, yeah, check these out. Surprisingly enough, it didn't flood. Now, what you're going to notice with this is you get a very, very wet vape. I don't know if you can see it just because it's not going to show up great on the camera. Look at the inside of my drip tip. It's just saturated with juice. That's not spitback. What that is it's producing so much vapor that's completely saturated with the liquid that as it hits a cool surface like this, or the inside of your mouth, which is relatively cool compared to the vapor, it starts condensing. And then you're going to notice you get a lot of juice building in your mouth. It's not spitting in them. And yeah, you get massive amounts of flavor out of this. I like it. Not sure what else to say. If you're looking at getting notch coils for whatever setup you got, be careful about the orientation you get. If you're going to be doing a vertical coil, get the kind that are like this. These are Iwodevape coils, and I'll put a link down below in the description. Get the kind with the leads stamped on opposite sides of the coil like this. If you have a single coil RTA that has post holes on the opposite side, you probably want to consider getting one of these as well. if you're going to do a single coil build, rather get these if you've got a dedicated single coil RTA. If you're going to do a single coil build in anything like a velocity deck, make sure you get the Joytech style, the ones that have both of the leads actually stamped. Instead of like this, they'll be stamp welded. This top lead here would be stamp welded on this side. The reason being, and you would hit the same problem that I would with the other style of coil, if I try to put this in a velocity deck, you're going to notice that one of these leads actually has to loop over the top of the coil. That's not ideal. So if you're going to try out notch coils, consider what kind of atomizer you got, and then pick the style of notch coil that you buy accordingly. I'll go ahead and put a link to these below. I'm really impressed with these. I've played around with a bunch of them. I had to sacrifice a couple to figure out how these work and, you know, my ideal settings. But I picked up a box of 20 of these for, that was like $6 or something to that effect. I'll put a link below from Fasttech. Yeah, and as long as these things last, I mean, they break down to about 33 cents a piece, which is more expensive than wrapping your own Clapton coil or something to that effect. But when you consider how long that these notch coils last, I mean, really all you got to do is dry burn these things after you get them all gunked up. They'll actually pay for themselves. It'll be cheaper in the long run. They're a little finicky to work with up front, especially if you're going to be doing a vertical build, but if you take the time to play with it and learn it, I think it's going to be really worth it, particularly if you, like me, like vertical coils. I prefer a vertical coil setup. If you do, check it out. If you don't prefer a vertical coil setup and you've got something like a velocity deck, Griffin, or whatever, try to get some other notch coils, the ones that are set up in the different orientation, with the stamp welded ends on both sides, or on the same side rather, and give it a shot. Word of caution about doing the horizontal coils with these: you do need to pack them with cotton. You need to pack this thing with cotton, and it's a 5mm inner diameter. You're going to use a lot of cotton. If you don't, two things are going to happen. You're going to simultaneously flood the coil, and you're going to burn the cotton, because the cotton gets heated up way too much at the little edges where there's no juice being fed to the coil. Not a whole lot else to say about this. I intended for this video review to be a little bit shorter than it ended up being, but it is what it is. Notch coils. Slightly better vapor production, tremendously better flavor. And if you're a flavor hound, you owe it to yourself to check it out. Again, I'll post the links below. And as always, remember, August 8th is coming up, so fight for your right to vape, fight for my right to vape, fight for everybody's right to vape. Check out CASA, check out the Right to Be Smoke-Free, check out AMSA. If you have a small business that has anything to do with vaping, check out SAFADA. Support the Cole-Bishop Amendment, support HR 2058. Notify your legislators, notify your representatives. Let them know it's important to you. If you don't tell them that it's important to you, they're not going to know that it is. And if you don't fight for our right to vape, no one will fight for us. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. And with that, I'll go ahead and leave you guys. And I tell you, I'm loving these things. Vape on.